Welcome to Hits Different.
Lee hee hee. I'm Ryan, and that's Molly.
In today's episode, we're joined by a very special guest, Melanie Deziel. Melanie was diagnosed with autism in her early 30s and became a Swiftie shortly after. She spoke with us about why she thinks people with autism relate to Taylor's music.
Melanie will also join our Tay Therapy discussion today, where we focus on stories submitted by Swifties with autism and how Taylor's music has helped them manage their emotions.
And of course, we'll let you know everything that Taylor Nation has been up to since our last episode.
Way to go, Tiger. Also, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or follow us wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And if you'd like to support us directly, please consider joining our Patreon or becoming a member on YouTube. The information on how to do that will be in the description of this episode. If you didn't see the news, nothing happened on Friday, March 28th. The mirror ball theory 328 led to a big fat nothing. But we did get a post by Taylor Nation the night before on the 27th that made me extra think something was going to happen on Friday, and then it still didn't. The post was Taylor Nation posting this edit of these childhood videos of Taylor to the song Robin and using hashtag way to go Tiger.
So of course, being the clowns that we are, it went very quickly from like, this means nothing, Taylor Nation is on one again, to, oh, well, you know, there are like the whole like big cat theory with Reputation and Look What You Made Me Do music video. And so of course Molly and I like ventured down into that avenue briefly. Molly made an edit, it was a whole thing, and you know, nothing happened. So we lived to see another day. I mean, I guess looking back, it could have given debutation because like it was video of her when she was younger, a lot of guitar imagery, and then obviously like the big cat reference to like, look what you made me do. But who knows? You know, I hope that in 50 years this will all be declassified because I truly don't understand any of it.
Yeah, why did we start talking about Robin on a random Thursday?
The day before a clown date that they knew about. Just saying. They know. They know.
And if you don't know what Ryan's referencing with the big cat theory, we'll link to this whole deep dive that she did back during the Eras tour when we started to see some more big cat themes being mixed in. But essentially, the quickest way to explain it is just Taylor is literally wearing a shirt with a tiger on it in the Look What You Made Me Do music video. She's walking with like a tiger or a jaguar in one of the scenes. Yep. Like there's multiple things.
She's wearing leopard print.
Way to go, Tiger. Robin, old footage of Taylor. The old Taylor can't come to the phone right now. What song does she say that in? Look What You Made Me Do. And she's wearing the tiger. So anyway, let us know what you think about the Robin post and what you took from that. Those were our clown notes. And the other big thing that happened in the last week is that All Too Well 10-minute version hit 1 billion streams on Spotify. How many of those were you, Ryan?
I was just going to be like, oh, half of those are me. Like, you're welcome, Tay. I got you, girl. I be listening to that on the regular. Okay. That's awesome. I love that that is the song that got that accolade because it deserves it. And it's wild because the song is 10 minutes long, but you know, it doesn't matter. It won't stop us. Could be 20 minutes. We'd still listen to the whole dang thing.
Oh, yeah. And as Taylor Nation posted to acknowledge this, they said it's the longest, not surprising, but first Taylor's version song to ever hit 1 billion streams on Spotify. So people, this means Love Story, which came out, I don't know, I guess maybe only like 8 months prior. But still, Love Story, Taylor's version, was the first Taylor's version song to come out. 10-minute All Too Well has more streams than that.
I know.
I mean, it was a new song, so I guess maybe that's the difference. It's like the surge of like, I have to learn every part of this song, this 10-minute song. But still, a 10-minute song, 1 billion streams. Someone do the math and let us know how many minutes and hours and days that adds up to.
So long. That's true, because when it first came out, I was listening to that like over and over and over. It was Molly's shower song for a long time to keep her on track. Like... Now I just listen to it when I'm feeling some type of way, which is often. So I just love that it's so loved. I love that she took that risk. I love that she gave us something she knew we wanted and we just validated it. And we're like, we did want that. Thank you. And we will move it to 1 billion streams.
There are no words, just applause
No
for
notes.
10 Minute All Too Well. Yeah.
No notes. The day this episode comes out, April 2nd, is World Autism Day, and April is Autism Awareness Month. To celebrate and recognize the autism community, we have a very special guest joining us for today's episode. Melanie Deziel is an author, keynote speaker, and award-winning branded content creator.
As I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, Melanie was diagnosed with autism in her early 30s, and since then, she has been working to raise awareness for the unique experiences of autistic women, more than 80% of whom remain undiagnosed and unrecognized by the age of 18. Through keynote speeches, corporate workshops, and her newsletter, she hopes to help more autistic women discover their identity sooner and help medical professionals learn to better recognize autistic women. In Melanie's newsletter, The Late Diagnosed Diary, she has written about Taylor Swift and why autistic, neurospicy, and otherwise neurodivergent Swifties relate to Taylor's music. We'll be linking to Melanie's newsletter, her articles on Taylor, and where to find her in the description of this episode, so make sure to go check those out.
And now it's time to bring on Melanie.
Welcome, Melanie, to the pod. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to start off, we wanted to read an excerpt from your newsletter. There's no shortage of discussion about Taylor Swift being an insanely talented songwriter. She's a skilled storyteller and master of wordplay, but I haven't seen a lot of formal discussion about the way that many autistics and other neurodivergent folks feel especially connected to Taylor Swift's music and deeply seen by her lyrics. And that's exactly why we wanted to have you on today, so we can have this discussion.
Yeah, I love it. That was one of those posts too that I worked on it for a long time and I was a little nervous to publish it because I don't know, it's always careful talking about someone's neurotype. I wanted to make it clear I'm not trying to diagnose her. That's not my place. That's not my goal at all. But I've had a lot of conversations with other autistics like myself who have felt really seen and her lyrics really resonate. And so I was like, there's got to be more of us out there who feel like this, worth talking about.
It's definitely a really interesting perspective. And Molly and I are both neurodivergent girlies. We both have ADHD, and Taylor's music is the grounding safe space. I never have felt more seen than when I listen to her music.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's so many layers to it, which I know I'm in good company to dissect all of those. But I think a big part of it too is I feel like Taylor Swift she says what she's thinking. Yes, she uses symbolism. Yes, there's a lot of analogies, but also, where she stands, what she's feeling. And so if you're someone who has trouble, understanding subtext and nuance and those kinds of things, it's refreshing to have someone be like, I'm really angry and here's why. And here's how I feel about that. You're like, oh, okay. I don't have to read between the lines. I get it.
That is so true. And so to start, we wanted to ask you about your experience being diagnosed later in life, and also when you found Taylor's music, and if it's been helpful for you in the same way it's been for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly enough, I'm late diagnosed autistic and late diagnosed Swiftie. They were both late to join. I was late to the party on all of them. So I was diagnosed I was 31 when I first really started to suspect that I was autistic, and it took me a couple years of formal assessments and things to get that in writing, so to speak. But I pretty much knew at that point, once I started doing my own research, it was pretty clear. And for me, it was a light bulb finally went on in this dark room that is my brain, that so many things made sense. I could see things so much more clearly. I understood things that I didn't before. I say this just pure vulnerability, straight from the vein. I've never loved myself more because I've never understood myself more than I do now. And that is such a gift. And I think it was through that process that I started to, unmasking is a big term, but really started to look back and reflect and think, how many of the things that I like are things that I was conditioned to like, or that I liked because someone else near me liked and I thought I was supposed to. And so part of this whole process has also been listening to music that I didn't usually listen to, trying new movie, new foods, new fashion, really just trying to figure out what do I truly like underneath all the masking and trauma and all these other things, right? Finding out who I really am. And as part of that, I never had a negative opinion of Taylor Swift. I wasn't anti, I just had never gone down the rabbit hole. You know what I mean? It wasn't something I had spent a lot of time with, but the more I listened to it, the more I was like, oh no, this is exactly what I need. This is this is amazing.
That is super relatable. Discovering yourself like helps you love yourself more. And it's so true. It's like you don't even know what you're capable of if you don't truly like know yourself. And it's such a thing. You're like, well, how do I even like start? And so music is definitely a way, especially when someone is saying it and you're like, wait, I've thought the same thing, just maybe not as like clear or, you know, coherent. Was there like a light bulb song that like started it all?
I don't remember exactly which song it was, honestly, and I probably should. It would make for a much better story. I'll just make it up next time someone asks.
It's totally okay.
I had heard a lot of like, you know, like the You Belong With Me and like a lot of the really common like ones that get major radio play, you know, that you'd hear in commercials and stuff. But I hadn't gone deeper into her discography to like hear the things that are not the everyday pop songs, right? And again, I know this is later in the game, but like the first time I heard Anti-Hero, I remember being like, oh no, this is like on another, I'm gonna need to re-listen to this several times. I need to, you know, I need to hear more of this. Miraval, Mastermind, like there's a few where it's just like, oh no, it just really caught me. And then I assumed if there's one song, then there's two and there's three, like I probably should just keep going. Like I'm just gonna keep uncovering. I do tend to gravitate toward her later stuff. And I think part of that is like the time in my life when I found her, I relate to her more recent music more. Some of like the debut stuff or, you know, like it's just, she was at a very different point in her life and had very different like priorities and problems. And so it's harder for me to relate to those things as, you know, as an adult. But TTPD is like my most played everything everywhere. Just so good. The more recent stuff has definitely been capturing me.
It's always so fun to talk to what we sometimes call like baby Swifties or like new Swifties because it's so cool to see like how you got on this side of Taylor's music. And you're right, it's like the mainstream stuff, you hear it and you're like, yeah, that's fine. But if you take the time to like go in, you're like, wait, she has a song about this, she has a song about that. And I totally agree. Like the earlier stuff, while it's like very nostalgic and pleasant to listen to, I do find myself deep in like the folklore, the Evermore, the Tortured Poets. Maybe because I feel like I'm a tortured soul and I relate more to that like gritty stuff.
Yeah. I think Tortured Poets will probably always be special for me too, because I think that's the first album that came out when I was already like a full-blown Swiftie. Not, well, I mean, I guess maybe I'm still a baby Swiftie by comparison. I don't want to overstate myself, but that was the first time I got to experience an album release like collectively along with everyone else. And, you know, like it dropping and getting the second album and just like mainlining nothing but that for like 24 hours, it hit differently because it was like it was a community thing, you know? So I just have like a deeper attachment to that, I think, because I feel like I experienced it alongside other people rather than like in isolation learning about it later, you know?
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. Being a part of like some sort of Swiftie event, whether it's like an album release or a tour or something like that, I feel like that really seals the deal because you're like, okay, I know I liked this stuff that she did before, and now as I do this new thing and it does become a communal experience, it just takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah, and I think there was also something really cool about a lot of her music I sort of discovered or really came to enjoy just completely on my own. And I have a couple friends who love her music that I could chat with about it, but it was so cool to have other people having that experience at the same time where it's like, have you listened to this? Have you listened to this? Did you notice this connection? Like, did you reference this callback? It just made it so much more engaging. And the topic of the post that we're talking about is all about the relatability of our music, but my background is marketing. And so I can't help but note, man, she does such an incredible job of like curating community, of creating experiences, of like tying into identity. So there's just so many different aspects for me to appreciate and dive into from like all different angles, you know?
You're a Swiftie. You're in it. You're not a baby Swiftie. I'm sorry. I take it back. You're in it. The lyrics that you referenced alone, I was like, oh my God, she knows more lyrics than like even I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it too is like when I was writing this piece, I did a lot of reading lyrics that like, you know, sometimes when you listen to it, you maybe don't see something, like hear something as clearly or make the connection. I read the lyrics of every song she has produced as part of the research for that. So I caught things that I wouldn't have if I was just listening through it or, you know, looking through with that specific lens of like, oh, okay, this is a part of a line, but like it definitely in the context of all these other lines can be in this list, you know?
I'm a lyric heavy person. Whenever Ryan and I have now been able to listen to a couple of new albums together, I need the lyrics up first listen. And Ryan would normally have not done that. She would have just been like,
I'm usually like a
headphones on,
vibe,
dark
like
room. Yeah.
first listen, I'm just like, I just want it to wash over me. I want the feeling first.
Yeah.
It's like a balance of how I absorb like the very first time. But yeah, once you see the lyrics and you're reading it, you're like, oh. And then, learning them obviously is like always the next step.
I wouldn't say I have them memorized though. That's because I haven't had the tour experience, that I've not gotten to see a show. So I haven't had to like study for that. I don't have all of them. I mean, TTPD, I might be okay, but I'd have to study pretty much everything before midnights, I think, if I was going to have enough memorized to make it worth my while.
So in that article, you referenced a lot of different themes throughout that are common throughout all of Taylor's music. Feeling like an outsider, masking, the sheer effort of existing, an unclear sense of self, decoding everything. I like how you call that effortful existing. I'd never heard that term before. How do you think those themes resonate specifically with people who are autistic or neurodivergent?
It probably feels relatable to a lot of people, but I think, if you are neurodivergent, particularly if you're autistic, that's the experience I can speak to. But it often feels like everybody has a rule book that you weren't given. And there's all this nuance that if no one has explicitly told you, you just completely miss it. And I joke that I feel like I have 10 tabs open all the time that no one else does, where it's like, okay, what do I know about body language? What do I know about tone of voice and sarcasm? What do I know? And it's like you're constantly having to manage all those things that come really naturally to other people, And so the same sort of social interaction or like the same, conversation, I've got like a director in my head, like, okay, at the beginning of I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, when you hear the like 1, 2, 3, okay.
2, 3, 4.
I've got that in my head that's like, oh, nope, we got arms crossed. That means disappointed. Okay, maybe you said something that upset them. Like, what did you say? It's like a director in my head, like managing all of those things that come naturally for others. So trying to like solve puzzles, and she talks a lot about like it was a game, like there's counter move, she just definitely tapped into that feeling that I have certainly experienced of like, man, this shouldn't be this hard. It feels like there's layers and layers of management and rules and like sneakiness happening here.
I don't think you referenced it specifically in the article, but one of those songs for me is This Is Me Trying, where Taylor says like, I was so ahead of the curve that the curve became a sphere. It's like, as someone who I'm just now realizing, because I was late diagnosed with ADHD, like just in the last couple of months, realizing all these things that I would have done to mask and just push through, not realizing that medication, for example, would help, things like that. Like hearing that just one line, I was like, oh my gosh, is this my life? Like I was so ahead of the curve. I've worked so hard, tried to be an overachiever. I just have this sense of perfectionism. And then at some point you like burn out and it's like, oh, fell ahead of the curve and then ended up here. And it's like, okay, wow. Taylor feels that way too, or whoever she's writing the song from that perspective of.
Yeah, I mean, and there's that particular aspect of like her effort and her trying. I feel like that it was present in a lot of songs. Like obviously This Is Me Trying is a big one, but like, Mirror Ball, like, I've never been a natural. All I do is try. Like you see it in Electric Touch a little bit, but like, I mean, that was co-written, but still, I mean, Mastermind is another big one, right? Like thematically, the whole thing is like, you're trying like really hard, So it just, that's something that I felt like really permeated a lot of it, whether it's explicitly saying like I'm trying hard not to look like I'm trying, or all I'm doing is trying, or the analogies that she makes like to a chess game or pulling a thread, solving puzzles, chain reactions of counter moves. Like you can just see the way those things are playing out in her head,
And you talk about like the rule book. And like, I totally get that of like, feels like everybody else like has it figured out, or everybody else just like knows how things are supposed to happen. And if she's okay with herself, then we all can be. Because if she's not, then you're like, if Taylor's not even comfortable, then like, what am I doing?
Well, and it's so interesting too, because I mentioned like my marketing background. As much as we feel like we know Taylor, like we're seeing a very intentionally curated version of her. Like, thanks, Tree Pain. Like, someone else is deciding what details we get, like what photos we get, and like all these things. But you can see, at least to some degree, like the fact that we can talk about a Bleachella era. Like, we've watched her reinvent. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen her color palette, her fashion sense, her like makeup makeup and hair and like aesthetic change so many times to align with these different life events. Yes, on some level, I'm sure it's branding and like promoting and giving Easter eggs, but it's also like she's trying on these different, these different experiences, these different personas. And I think what I love about like particularly Midnights into TTPD is I feel like there's a lot of consistency there for her. I don't know that that's true. Like, again, I'm just hoping for the best for her, but like, it does feel like there's more of a, this is what I want to be making. This is what I want to be doing, and not like optimizing for radio play. Like, she doesn't have to worry about that anymore, like just getting to make the things that she wants to make. That makes me happy as just like a fan for another person, like I feel like she's gotten to do a little bit more of that lately and kind of stick with herself and maybe not feel so much pressure to like constantly have to reinvent herself.
Right. Yeah. It's like with Folklore and Evermore gave her that validation that she could write about anything. It didn't have to be her own personal life. It could just be stories she's making up, and that people would still care, and that the production didn't have to be pop or country or whatever. It could just be whatever she wants it to be. And then I agree, like Midnights and Tortured Poets, it felt like she was reconciling that with herself on Midnights of like, wait, I can still be pop star Taylor, but have the kind of music that I want to have and tell the kind of stories that I want to have. Yeah. And then on Tortured Poets, it was like, and I also went through a lot of really hard stuff, and like, here you go.
Yeah. I think it's also like, clearly she processes, and I think she said this in interviews and stuff, like or in the documentary, but she processes things through music. Like it's journaling, it's poetry to her. It's not just like sitting down to write a song. It's like the way that she processes things. And so when I start to see some of that consistency, to me that feels like, okay, she's probably also feeling more clear on herself and like, feeling more comfortable expressing those things. And I don't know, I think probably most Swifties feel this. I feel like she's gotten so much hate for talking about her personal life and being as open and vulnerable as she has been. And, there's probably like 12 layers of misogyny in there to unpack, but it makes me happy that she could do a double album like she did, have so many things that are so clearly references that we don't even always know for sure who she's referencing. It feels like she's in control of her own narrative there. And that is really cool to see, because she hasn't always had that.
It makes me think about Reputation, like being a part of a narrative. A lot of Swifties have talked about like Taylor's music being like stimmy or like scratching this little itch in your brain, which like there's so many notes that I definitely relate to. What do you think it is about her production style that like creates this feeling?
I guess I don't know. Like, I don't know enough about the production side of things, I think, to like really speak to it. But what I think, or I assume, is that she knows the things that her fans respond really positively to, and she knows the things that like she responds positively to, and I think she just gravitates toward that. Like, one of my favorite things is when I hear like a really similar riff or a really similar cadence from like a different song, and I'm like, oh, she knew that one felt really tingly, like she knew that was a good one, so she like found a way to reincorporate. I don't know, I don't know the thought process that goes into all of that, but I just have to assume that like if we think it scratches your brain in just the right way, and like, oh, that's a thing, like that's a good one, that she probably must feel the same. Or Jack, when she's working with him, like they must have a similar reaction of like, ooh, that was a good one, like we got to keep that.
I was thinking more about the use of repetition after I saw that in the footnotes of your newsletter. I was listening to Taylor all weekend, like I usually do, doing chores, yard work, whatever, and I realized, oh my gosh, all of my favorite Taylor songs really are very repetitive, but what I love about it is that she'll change like one word or something like the third time she repeats it. So she's making the same point and you think she's gonna say the same thing, and then she flips it just a little bit. It makes it not boring, because like the song has like an arc and it ends up changing towards the end, even if it is a little repetitive. There's definitely something about that scratches my brain.
Yeah, well, and it's cool too, because that change, like you're saying, it has like it changes the meaning, like, oh my god, I'm gonna blank now. So Long London, right, where it's like the switch from like you'll find someone, I'll find someone, like it just it's a tiny little change to the lyric, but it completely like inverts the meaning. And so although it feels very familiar, like it's familiar enough that you kind of know what's coming, it gives you that like, oh, this is different. Like it's like a light bulb moment, you know? And I think it just speaks to what a masterful lyricist she is, that she's able to do that so often. And I think there's a lot of people like from the outside. I know every now and then I see those like what Taylor Swift music sounds like to non-Swifties, where they're really only familiar with like the major radio hits from earlier in her career, and they just assume everything is like, I miss my boyfriend. Like they just like simplify everything, right? They're seeing some part of that, but they're lacking the depth to see that a lot of that repetition actually is like in service of a bigger narrative or a plot twist or, you know, like a big reveal that comes later. But you need to spend some time with it to like see that depth.
Right. Just like with So Long London, she flipped that phrase, so long London, like saying goodbye, but also I've loved you for so long London. Yes. And it's just like, it's so satisfying.
I literally was going to say that. She's a master of wordplay. It's like she just takes things, and like when you get the track list before you've even heard the song, sometimes it's not what you think it's going to be, or like the emphasis and the pronunciation or whatever, it's not actually what it's going to be. And like she uses a lot of exclamation marks and just different things, like the song Slut, for example. Like I remember it having an exclamation mark, didn't know what to expect, and then you hear the song and you're like, oh, like that's not, it's like a soft, you know, like a soft mark. I don't know. So yeah, her wordplay is wild.
One of the greatest examples of that like skill that she has is I'm Gonna Get You Back, right? Where it's like, I mean, for anyone who is not
Molly's favorite song. What a Benny.
So good, right? Like you think it's about like, I'm gonna, you know, earn your love back, but it's also like, maybe I'm also gonna like, you know, mess up your bike or, you know, slit your tires or, you know, whatever. But it's like every verse, she's like bringing us back and forth with this tension. The same words have a different meaning, like from, you know, each verse to each verse. And I think that's so dope. That's like a real skill to be able to do that.
I mean, she's a poet. That's accurate. She is a poet.
Sometimes I think that is another fun experience of like really looking at the lyrics and part of why I wanted to read the lyrics and not just listen to the music for that like analysis is because I think she does write a lot of it as poetry. To see it completely separated from the music is a slightly different experience, you know, to read it that way, maybe like reveals different meaning, you know?
For sure. Yeah. When you're not distracted by like the banger bops and like all the music side of it, you're like, oh, I could literally just read this as if it was a poem.
Yeah, I think everything we've talked about so far just like further reiterates why her music can be comforting and relaxing to the brain, why it might scratch an itch in our brain, keep us intrigued, the pictures she's painting. And to circle it back to our Tay Therapy segment, where people write in like how the lyrics of a specific song or maybe an album has helped to get them through something, or maybe it's just like their go-to song when they know they're having a bad day and they like want to be lifted back up. That's kind of how we've set up this Tay Therapy, as we call it. And so Ryan will start with the first submission, and it was actually our very first ever submission that we got. You know, we've been reading them out of order in the different types of themes and categories that we get, and we were saving this one for our special episode.
So David writes in and says, Taylor's music is a huge part of my life. I listen to the following Taylor Swift songs. And for reference, he lists a lot of songs, so I won't read all of them, but a few that really resonate. So Blank Space, Taylor's version. Wildest Dreams, Taylor's version. I Knew You Were Trouble, Taylor's version. Karma, featuring Ice Spice. Very specific, love that. Mean, Taylor's version. We got some rep in there. Look What You Made Me Do, Getaway Car, Ready for It. So all of the good stuff. And then he says, her songs bring me a big smile and the energy to get through the day, and my love for Tay Tay. I'm on the autism spectrum. Her music is one of my tools for managing my emotions.
So relatable. I'm curious, do you guys have like a song that's your go-to if you're in a particular mood? This is my happy song. This is my bad day at work song. Do you have like a go-to like that?
Sure do.
Yeah. My go-to if I need to feel happy is Cruel Summer. I'm like, if I need a pick-me-up, I've got to put on Cruel Summer, the live from the Eras Tour version. I was like,
the live version. Prove it. You know, I could be Taylor Swift for a few minutes. It's very necessary.
I love it. Anytime I feel like I've been wronged or slighted, the Smallest Man Who Ever Lived is so cathartic to just the slightest thing, like cut me off in traffic, like I don't care. That's a good reason to put it on, like that's one of my go-tos for like a particular emotion.
We've talked about recently on recent episodes, I've been going through a breakup and like a lot of life changes. So we had like a whole playlist of like, here's the journey we want to go through with Taylor's music. And it's so like, what stage are we in? Where are we at like emotionally? So there's so many at this point, but Cruel Summer is a good upper. And then like, if I want to go deep down, the All Too Well 10-minute version is always my go-to.
Thank you, David, so much for writing in. I love that you have her music to be able to help you manage your emotions. The whole point of Tay Therapy is like, how is Taylor helping us work through the things we need to work through? So our next submission is from Helena. And for anyone who's potentially watched Severance, when I saw this submission, I was like, oh my gosh. Melanie laughed. Have you seen Severance before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. To make clear, we're talking about Helena, not Helly. This is very specific. This is the Audi
This is Helena,
situation.
yes. Ryan's like, I don't know. You have to watch Severance. It's so good. Anyway, so Helena wrote in, I accidentally found Taylor Swift right around the time that I chose to get evaluated for an autism diagnosis as a 20-something-year-old. I'd been suspecting that I might be autistic for a couple of years, but as I got closer to graduating college, all of my fears and insecurities arose to the surface, and I realized that most of the insecurities had to do with things that made me suspect I was autistic in the first place. The whole process lasted for months, as well as the months that followed, receiving my diagnosis and the processing that came with it. Taylor's music was not only comforting during all that time, but it was cathartic. Specifically, songs like You're on Your Own, Kid, Seven, Mastermind, and Mirrorball were really cathartic for me because as a kid growing up not knowing I was autistic, I felt really lonely so much of the time, and those songs felt so healing to the lonely kid I felt like I still carried around with me.
Aside from that, I found her melodies to be really comforting and soothing. There's something called stimming, which means doing a repetitive movement that soothes the nervous system. It's actually something that everybody does. Think of tapping a pen or picking at your cuticles. Guilty. But autistic people tend to stim more frequently and sometimes more obviously. But as someone who is high masking, learned to hide my autistic traits a lot, I stim constantly, but in a very subtle way. However, once I got my diagnosis and became more understanding of these parts about myself, Taylor's songs enabled me to stim in the comfort of my bedroom. By stimming while listening to certain songs with melodies that are particularly soothing, for instance, the fluttery melody in Daylight when she sings, and I can still see it all
I was
in my mind.
Are you gonna sing?
I was like, I know. I'm like, nobody wants that. All of you, all of me intertwined. It was like the most freeing thing I've ever felt. Her music means so much, and it will always remind me of a really lovely time in my life.
I love the songs that Helena mentioned because those, I have already mentioned Mastermind, Mirrorball, like a lot of those are ones that also really resonated with me and my autistic experience, especially late diagnosed. So it sounds like we're picking up the same vibes on some of those songs.
Yeah, well, the specific part of Daylight, I know Ryan and I both love that song Daylight, and I never really thought about that specific part, like how ethereal it is. And it's just like a really cool sensory moment almost.
And just like how I've talked about, like how Taylor's been there for me, like while going through like my life stuff, it's like so cool that like Helena is going through this huge part of her life where she's like discovering a whole nother side of herself. And while Taylor's music is there along the way and helping push through it, it's just so cool. It's so inspiring just how many different stories people have and how her music has touched them in their own like unique way.
Yeah. And I think what I love about both of these submissions too is that we're able to speak about the fact that her lyrics and her music connect to us on like an autistic level, on a neurodivergent level, regardless of what Taylor's neurotype is. Like, it's not that we're sitting here saying she's just like me or like, Taylor is autistic, because again, like it's not necessarily our place from the outside to ever know something like that. But it's beautiful that she's done such an amazing job of creating her lyrics and music and speaking to like such core human experiences that no matter what walk of life you come from, there's a way to feel seen by her music, by her lyrics. And I think that speaks to it, right? It's like none of these submissions are speculating about Taylor herself. We're just able to see a very unique part of ourselves in some of the music that she creates, which I think is, again, just like a mark of her songwriting abilities.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah, we have a rule on our podcast where if we speculate about anything, it's it's only release dates of Taylor's versions. We try not to speculate about what's going on in her personal life, or definitely not trying to diagnose her with anything. When we talk about her music, it's like, I don't even know if she wrote this from her own perspective. Maybe she's writing it from someone else's, or a character she's made up in her head. Like you said, just the point of it is the way that she's created this world for us all to escape into. We're finding pieces of it that relate to our own life and can apply it into our own lives instead of applying it to her.
You guys remember being in like high school English class, and you'd have like the teacher would be like, now why do you think that they mentioned that the sweater is green, and thinking like, oh my God, this is the most pointless thing. Like, when will I ever use this in life? And here we are evaluating different shades of red and what the meanings are, right? Like, it is very much an art. It's storytelling and it's writing, and like it's also just so fun to feel like we're kind of decoding all of that, you know, on our own and figuring out those different experiences. It's really cool.
Just like a lifelong English class, which English was one of my favorite subjects. I mean, we're all journalism people here, so I'm sure, you know, I'm not alone there.
That would be another good topic, like Taylor Swift spelling test, like soliloquy, you know, like you know, like, and also ran, like she's taught a lot of vocab words.
I Google a lot of what she says. She's helped me be a better speaker and writer for sure.
Yeah.
Rivulets. That was a tortured poet's. Rivulets to send my plastic smile. I was like, I need a second to figure out what you're trying to say here. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and teaching all of us about your journey and why Taylor's music may be helpful to someone who's going through something similar. Hopefully everyone can find like their Taylor song, whether you're full-blown Swiftie or not. Hopefully everyone can find one Taylor song that becomes like a comfort song to them. And we just wanted to give you a moment to share where our listeners can maybe find you if they want to learn more, and we can link to anything in the description of the episode as well.
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys will share the links. So my newsletter that I write about my autistic experience is called the Late Diagnosed Diaries on Substack, so you can search for it there, or the links in the show notes. I've written 2 articles actually about Taylor's lyrics and how, they're autistically relatable, kind of specifically. One with her whole discography, and then another one dedicated to TTPD. So those might be interesting for folks. But most of what I do is actually more in the marketing side of things. You know, I'm a speaker and an author. So my website is melaniedeziel.com. If you're curious about any of that marketing stuff, about my books that I've written on marketing, you can check that stuff out on my website. But mostly I think those articles and the newsletter is probably the most relevant stuff.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me share my story.
We enjoy talking to Melanie so much. Not only do we feel seen by Taylor's music, but we now feel seen by some of the experiences that Melanie was sharing. And we hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as we did.
Her perspective was so cool, so insightful, and I'm just so excited that you guys got to hear that.
If you want to submit your own Tay Therapy stories, how to do that will be listed in the description of this episode, as well as where to find Melanie and all the things that she referenced, like her newsletter. We'll be linking to that, so go check it out. And we'll be back next week for another episode. And in 2 weeks, a fortnight, some might say, is the official 1-year anniversary of when Tortured Poets came out.
We're currently working on the best way to celebrate one of the most iconic albums from Tay, so we will keep you all posted, but it's going to be a good episode no matter what.
Thanks for watching or listening. Make sure to subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening to your podcasts.
Bye.